Geek Time.
You're listening to the Geek Time Superbowl special.
Unbelievable! Vikings win it!
With hosts Chris Boris
With a touchdown!
and Tim Warner.
Pass is intercepted at the goal line by Malcolm Butler.
As well as a few geeky Super Bowl related guests.
Stokely! Wow! Touchdown!
All right, welcome to Geek Time, the Super Bowl spectacular special. I just love that intro. It turned out so well. And this is season 1, episode 6 coming at you. We have all kinds of great geeky guests. We're going to be talking about all kinds of football related items today. And as far as guests go, yeah, we've got some really good ones today. They're Super Bowl related. They are some advertising guys from the 1980s. One that worked on the Spudz McKenzie account, and another worked on this the Bud Bowl account. And I'm super excited about that because
Bud
you know
Bowl!
me. I love the Bud Bowl. I did an
Bud
Irate
Bowl!
80s episode on it. So yeah,
Yes,
I
you know what? You fans, if you have not seen that, check out Chris's Irate the 80s Bud Bowl episode, because one thing that you do, Chris, that I looked all over YouTube, I couldn't find it. There's not a lot of people that rank or talk about each individual Bud Bowl. Like, you can actually find the clips, which is great, but there's not a lot of people that actually like rank. Like, I want to see like a top 6 list of like Bud Bowls. You know, like what's your favorite Bud Bowl? I mean, we know 4 would be the worst, but I mean,
yes. Oh God, I want to. I can't wait to talk to this guy about the 4th Bud Bowl, because that, boy, you talk about a ball-dropping moment.
yeah, and like I remember Bud Bowl 3 was really fun, and I was so amped when I watched the game. Was it 1993 with Bud Bowl 4? And we were all excited. We were like even talking about like, oh, who's gonna win this quarter? Who's gonna do this? And it's a dude running around, and they would just show like not even the highlights, just what the score was at the end of each one. It's like some dude running around trying to get his ticket.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, like the Bud Bowls, they were building some good momentum there. They had the first one, second one, third one. They brought in Bud Dry as like a
Bud
third
Dry,
opponent.
right.
And when the 4th one came along, they kind of ditched the whole gimmick and they followed this guy running around for like 5 different commercials.
Yeah,
looking
each
for his
commercial was
ticket.
him running around to get his ticket. And then what was always fun was like the little stop motion, or I think later on with CGI, but the little figures facing each other. And then instead of seeing that, we're just cutting to some guy running around like some New York City, street or whatever, trying to get a ticket that's blowing away. And then at the end of each commercial, they would just, Budweiser's, up 12-9. Or it's like, what? Where's the game?
Yeah, that drove me nuts.
Missed it by that much.
And it was interesting, too, because I remember after they did 5 and 6, which were great. They were all computer generated. They went back to the gimmick of these guys on the island. And I was like, oh, no, we're back to this again. And that was kind of the end of the Bud Bowl. And I remember it was Bud Bowl 1997. They called it Bud Bowl 97. And
that's right. They stopped the numbers. That's right.
Yeah, and I was working at a grocery store at the time. And in the back of the grocery store, in the beer section, they had these big displays. They're like, Bud Bowl 97, Battle at the Bayou. And I'm like, oh my God, are they going to bring this back? So I was like, oh, this is great. So I was anticipating another Bud Bowl like I was used to. And no, it wasn't. It was just like a one commercial thing that just didn't have any stop motion animation or anything that we've come to expect.
Yeah, dude, like, what is up with the 90s and them stopping numbering things, by the way? Like, is the Bud Bowl another symptom of that? Like, you have all the horror movies where we can't call it, like, Friday the 13th 9. We have to call it something else. Like, same thing here with Bud Bowl. It's like we can't call it Bud Bowl 8 or Bud Bowl 9 or what.
I think Rain Johnson was in charge of that one.
But you subverted expectation.
Subverted those expectations, Tim.
Oh, God. Was he born yet? Yeah, I think he was.
He was thinking about doing Looper, I guess, by then. So, all right, we're going to get to our first part of the show. As you know, we like to do our freaking geeking out.
Geeking out or
Freaking out! And so I have a quick one. For the geeking out, I'm excited. This is our 6th show. And we've been pumping them out almost on a weekly basis. And this was when I first started doing the reboot of Geek Time, this was just going to be a side thing. I was like, yeah, just because I love doing something like this, but it's starting to gain momentum, and I'm really geeking out on the numbers that we're starting to get, because each episode is starting to get more and more views. And the last one I just checked on YouTube, our last episode got 14,000 views, and I was like, wow, that just really blew me away. So thank you guys for that. I appreciate
everybody.
it. Yeah, these episodes are starting to get about 30 to 40,000 views on all the different platforms I have it on. So I can't believe it's catching on like this. Thank you guys. Thank you for sharing, and just keep the love and support growing. We really need it, because this stuff is all done through the grassroots level, as you know. And the bigger reach I can get, the better guests I can get. And it's nice now because I've played that podcast game where I get a lot of people say, come to me and be like, hey, can you be on my podcast? And you look at the numbers and they only get maybe like 100 people, 200 people. But when I tell some of the people that I want on as guests, like, hey, look, we're getting 30 to 40,000 people per episode, I rarely get a no. So some of the guests that we have coming up are amazing. And some of the things that they're going to talk about, if they don't make headlines on some website out there, I'm going to be surprised, because the stuff they're going to talk about is just mind-blowing. So, all right, Tim, what about your geeking freaking out?
Well, it's Super Bowl, baby. So we got to be talking about food. So here's one of my favorite things about the Super Bowl is doing themed Super Bowl meals and themed Super Bowl snacks and so on. So, for instance, a couple years ago, when it was the Eagles and Chiefs the last time, we did a sandwich battle between the Philly steak and cheese. And then wait a
minute. This is going to be the sandwich bowl, like the Bud Bowl?
Sure, it was the sandwich bowl. And hey, for the Chiefs, we had a Kansas City Masterpiece barbecue pork sandwich. Last year, we did the Taylor Swift skit and Kelsey for Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift. And then for the San Francisco 49ers, we did Rice-A-Roni 2 ways.
No! God, please, no!
Oh, man.
And then for this year now, Kansas City Chiefs, they win. It's the three-peat. So we're doing the 3-meat three-peat. That's right, baby. Pork ribs, beef ribs. We're doing a Cornish game hen for the Eagles, because fly, game birds fly. So,
clear out those arteries. Here comes the food.
So, and as for my freaking out for it there, not to get too sportsy for it there too, but my goodness, man, the Buffalo Bills, they're never going to win the freaking Super Bowl ever, because they're 0-4 in the Super Bowl from the 90s, and they're now 0-4 against Patrick Mahomes. So going back to my food dish, one of the dishes we're having for a side is my 0-4 cheese buffalo dip.
Oh, man.
Because they are 0-4.
On the clock. All right, so with that out of the way, I think we're going to do our next segment. Yes, we're going to be talking about all things Super Bowl commercials. And I've been trying to find some top 10 or top 20 lists out there of some of the greatest commercials out there. And this was hard to do because it seems like everybody has their special favorite era of time where their commercials came from. And a lot of these sites like to pull from the old, a little from the new, and a lot of the new ones, they're not that memorable for me.
Yeah.
So a lot of the ones we're going to talk about are some of the old school from long ago. Yeah.
Like, I know, if ever you guys are interested, I think it's the night before the Super Bowl, I want to say Saturday night, they do best Super Bowl commercials, and they just kind of like relive some of the best commercials, and then they also go into depth behind the scenes with some of the new commercials coming. It's kind of a little neat little hour special they do. That. Yeah, they do a neat little hour special for it there too. It's pretty fun. Mean Joe Green is always number one. That's like iconic there too. I feel like that one to me is like the little passe because of like Family Guy spoofing on it, and like I think The Simpsons did a spoof on it too. I think
everybody spoofed it, and it's kind of funny because I know what program you're talking about. Every time they show that on TV, they always have the Mean Joe Green, the Apple commercial, and we'll talk about those in a second. So I have the Mean Joe Green commercial right here. We'll listen to a second of that.
I just want you to know, I think you're the best ever.
Yeah, sure.
Want my Coke? It's okay, you can have it.
No.
Really, you can have it.
So yeah, that one always gets airtime every year. It's the kid handing Mean Joe Green the Coke,
and then he hands the jersey to the kid. Yeah,
so that's always like a staple. And
then,
of
before
course,
we go into a lot of these, Chris, do you want to just say what your favorite ones are, just in case we don't get to them, or because I have a couple, and they probably won't be on any lists. That's the thing.
Yeah, so I'll talk about a couple of my favorite ones right now. So, of course, like the Bud Bowl, that was always my favorite. We kind of dipped into that, and I'll talk about that more when I have my guest on, talking about that a little later. But one of my favorite ones, another one, is the Tabasco commercial where the guy's sitting outside. He's just sitting there drinking Tabasco sauce straight out of the bottle, and then the mosquito lands on his arm, sucks his blood, and he takes off, and the thing explodes.
Oh, I forgot about that. That's a good one, man.
That one. That was always my favorite one.
I got one that maybe you won't remember. It's a Nissan commercial, and it was the pigeons. Do you remember this one?
No.
It starts off with the pigeons. There's like a general pigeon, and they're like talking like, okay, men, we need to go ahead and get in formation, and we need to. He's doing all the military speak, and they go out there and they're flying and they're playing Danger Zone. From Top Gun, and they see a guy who's getting a car. He just got a car wash, and they're trying to bomb him with their excrement.
This Dirty Bird, do you read me?
Dirty Bird, this here Sky Rat, I copy.
I've spotted a gold mine with a freshly washed beauty.
Ooh-wee! Let's rock and roll!
All right, Sky Rat.
It's interesting. One of the birds sounds like the voice of John Ratzenberger. I don't know if that's him or not, but it kind of has that.
I don't think so. He said it's like somebody trying to do a John Ratzenberger impression. To be honest with you, but no one ever talks about it. So, you have another one at all that's pretty funny?
So yeah, I remember back. I think it was 1995, but the M&Ms, like the M&M commercials, once they started going CGI with the animated characters,
yes,
they first did those during the Super Bowl, and I remember it was Red, but Red was not voiced by Billy West. Before that, it was John Lovitz. And John Lovitz was
that's right,
the voice of Red. And they were interacting with another celebrity. Don't ask me who the celebrity was. I don't remember. But that was like their gimmick for a while. It was Red with a celebrity, and then they brought Yellow, who was John Goodman.
Yes.
And I don't know who they got to replace him.
I might not have even paid attention that it was John Goodman, but I remember John Lovitz has a very distinct voice, and I remember hearing that. I forgot that he was the voice of the Red M&M.
Yeah, and Billy West could voice match him perfectly, so what a great choice. But I remember, so it was John Goodman. I think those two aired the first year, and I think the following year they brought in Blue. And don't ask me who Blue was, I don't remember, but I remember he did a commercial with, what's his name? The Baldwin guy with the long blonde hair.
Stephen Baldwin?
Yeah, Stephen Baldwin. Yeah. It was him with Blue. So they did a commercial together. And then I think the following year, then they introduced the orange M&M, who was very nervous. Right. So every year they introduced a new M&M.
People might not remember this dude, but Blue was not an original M&M. It was not one of the M&Ms. And what happened was in the 90s, they did a voting thing that you could actually go on and decide. And I believe it was the choice was blue, pink, or purple maybe were the three colors that were the choices. And Blue won hands down, like not even a question. So that's why when they started when they had the characters doing, they made the Blue one a very kind of popular, everybody always talks about how popular the Blue one is because it got so many votes.
And I also, while you were talking, I pulled up the commercial that I was talking about. So it's the John Lovitz with Steven Weber. And
Steven Weber, okay.
Yeah, and I think he was a comic at first that appeared in, what was it, Wings or something?
It was in Wings, and then he also went on to be in The Shining on TV, the Jack Nicholson role.
Oh, okay. Oh, what a legacy. But it says 1996, so let's play a second of that here.
Wow. Look who we have here.
Just your friendly neighborhood M&Ms. Sit down.
The same M&Ms that come in the bag?
Same ones.
Only bigger.
With a colorful shell, just like this?
The actor's catching on.
Rich milk chocolate on the inside?
Yes.
Oh, then I'm really glad you came by.
Why is that?
Because I'm all out. Which one of you is Peanut?
He is. I hear he's delicious. So long, buddy.
Oh, that's what it was. Okay, so they were both in the first commercial.
Okay.
But I didn't realize that. I thought they introduced them separately. But yeah, those voices are so iconic with John Lovitz, because he's from, I remember him in The Critic and The Simpsons. And he just has that voice. I cannot mimic it, but
I know. It's totally for it. All right, my next one is a Pepsi commercial from the 90s also. We were really big in the 90s. We were younger then, so that's obviously...
I hope it's the same one that I was going to say.
Is it the YMCA Bears?
Oh, no.
Okay, so that's the one I'm picking, because even though like the joke is the Bears go into this small town, everybody runs inside and they're looking out the window and the Bears are there, and all of a sudden the Bears stand up and start doing a YMCA, but instead they're doing PEPSI. The best part about it, the funniest part about it, is this old man who looks out the window and goes, "Lord help us if they ever learn the Macarena."
So yeah, it's kind of hard to showcase this over audio, but yeah, they're doing the YMCA and the Macarena at the very end here.
Heaven help us if they ever learn the Macarena.
It was always a funny stinger to me, though, with that.
Well, my favorite commercial from Pepsi was always the one where the two guys were sitting in the cafe, and the one worked for the Pepsi company and the other worked for the Coke company, and they're sitting there and they're talking about their families and their loved ones, and all of a sudden the guy that works for Pepsi gives the guy for Coke, he's like, "Here, take a sip," and the Coke guy's like, he looks around, make sure nobody's looking, and he takes a sip, and he's like, "Oh, that's pretty good," and then he returns the favor, and the Coke guy gives the Coke to the Pepsi guy and takes a sip. So the Coke guy goes and reaches for the Pepsi again, and the Pepsi guy's like, "No, that's mine." The next scene, it cuts to it looks like a bar fight. The chair goes launching out the window. So
I forgot about that one. Yeah, that was a good one too.
Good song.
Great song.
So yeah, it's hard to present visually, but yeah, it's just there's the. Yeah, some of these are horrible to do over audio streaming. Yeah.
Yeah, but you know what? You can always go check. They can always go check out YouTube and see these clips, because they all should be on there. I mean, they're
make sure. Yeah, all you have to do is put the keywords that we're talking about here, and that they should be able to pull up. So another one that I really loved was all the McDonald's commercials they did with Michael Jordan, because at the time it was a really big rivalry with Michael Jordan and Larry Bird. They had a whole video game franchise built around those two, like 1 versus 1 or whatever that video game was called. And then McDonald's did, hey, let's have them fighting over fries. And I remember they did a couple commercials back to back year after year where they were bouncing things off the walls and their gimmick was nothing but net.
Over the Grand Canyon, off your face, through the window, off the floor, nothing but net.
Watch this shot. Over the beach, through the window, off the scoreboard, nothing but net.
So this morphed into a whole thing where they took Michael Jordan and then faced him off against Bugs Bunny, which
would then spawn Space Jam.
Yeah, so the first one was a Nike commercial with Michael Jordan, who is Air Jordan, versus Bugs Bunny, who is Hair Jordan.
Hair Jordan, that's right. That's right.
What's up? Chuck, Hair Jordan, and Air Jordan.
So yeah, that predates Space Jam by a couple years, because that was 1993, and then of course they did a couple commercials with other Looney Tune characters after that. But yeah, that was kind of like the genesis of Space Jam. And that's how I think Space Jam, the first one, worked so well over the second one, is because it was like this organic thing that came together.
Right.
Like when Space Jam came along, it was like, that makes sense. I want to see that. Where when the second one came out, it was like, all right, this makes no sense. This just came out of left field. Like, I don't care about this.
It was trying to be like they got lucky because they were just throwing things at a wall, and we're like, okay, what are we going to pair up with Michael Jordan for a McDonald's commercial? Oh, let's do Bugs Bunny. LeBron James was just trying to do what Michael Jordan did in Space Jam. It never organically. There was no LeBron James McDonald's commercials with Bugs Bunny. There was no reason to do a Space Jam 2 except to make money.
Right. And some of these other commercials, you see a theme. Like, it was always the same commercial companies that you're waiting to see year after year. It was always Pepsi. You always wanted to see what Pepsi was going to do, McDonald's was going to do, and Budweiser, because they always had the coolest gimmicks.
And
like
last 10 years, Doritos has really tried to do a lot.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, Doritos really stepped up their game, I will say, yeah. And in 1995, Bud Bowl had their Budweiser with the Budweiser frogs. So I always thought that was a good one.
Another one that's been spoofed a billion times. I mean, was it Simpsons that had the alligator eat them and say Coors?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I do remember that. And then, of course, a couple years later, Budweiser tried to outdo themselves with the Penguins commercial with the Doobie Doobie Doo. I don't think that one caught on too well.
Yeah.
Doobie Doobie.
That's the third one tonight.
It's okay. The police are tracing the call.
Yeah, so I didn't care for that one too much.
You know what? Sometimes some of these Super Bowl commercials try too hard. Puppy Baby Monkey or whatever that was with Pepsi. Was it Baby Puppy Monkey? And it was
right.
What they're trying to do, Chris, they're trying to do What's Up, which was huge.
Right.
What's Up was like the biggest thing for like 5 years. You'd hear What's Up.
Absolutely. So that came a couple years later, I believe. And I remember there was a time there where it was also spoofed in the Scream, the spoof. What was those called? Scary Movie. Yeah, not another Scary Movie or something like that.
Yeah, but they basically spoofed the commercial with the Scream mask. They had the weird, stupid looking Scream mask that had like the tongue hanging out and everything.
Yeah, that's so iconic. And I remember there was a stretch of time there. It was always those E-Trade talking babies, and
I hated those.
I did too, because once they did it, then everybody started to do it. I think that came out with the. I think the advent of that was the dancing baby, that internet meme, if you could call it that, way back when.
Wasn't that an Ally McBeal thing from back in the day?
Yeah, well, it was on the internet before that, but Ally McBeal kind of streamlined that into pop culture, and then it just took off. So I think E-Trade kind of. I always hated those.
It's Baby Genius's humor, and I mean, somebody went and saw those movies, I guess. And those E-Trade ones would always be on there. And I'm like, well, I disagree with this list right here.
Yeah, and I will say, as far as newer commercials go, I always like the Snickers ones. They've always stepped to the plate with the Betty White, the Snickers ad.
Oh, yes.
Mike, what is your deal, man?
Oh, come on, man. You've been riding me all day.
Mike, you're playing like Betty White out there.
That's not what your girlfriend said.
Baby.
Oh, man, that's just... and I remember there was an obscure one, too, where Rolled Gold pretzels did a commercial where George Costanza came down into the crowd.
Yes.
And I thought that was great. But yeah, you could just go on and on.
Sometimes the celebrity ones, man, they paid so much for the celebrity, they didn't pay for the joke writers. So the celebrity ones kind of
seems to happen a lot now.
Yeah, especially now. I think it was a couple years ago they had like Christopher Walken. I was really looking forward to one because I saw that special and they had behind the scenes. I'm like, ooh, this one has Christopher Walken. It's gonna be funny. It wasn't funny. It sucked.
Right. And okay, that'll wrap up our segment. We'll be here all day, but we'll be back with some guests on the Super Bowl Geek Time special.
Technical difficulties. Please stand by.
Geek Time continues transmitting next with
Spudz McKenzie's Alan Rubens.
All right, guys, so if you're a fan of the Irate Gamer series on YouTube, which was my flagship show, they are now available on Blu-ray. I finally did the first 2 volumes, and you can get the first, 80 episodes on 2 volume sets. So it's quite the nostalgic overload for all you guys.
Nice.
So the first edition has 61 episodes in all, contains seasons 1 through 6. The second set contains seasons 7 and 8, which contains over 3-4 hours of content, bonus features, all that good stuff. And if all goes well, I'll have the third set being worked on this summer, which will contain seasons 9 and 10.
Plus, Ronnie the Skeleton's going to do commentary, right?
Ronnie the Skeleton is there in all his glory, even in bloopers and bonus scenes and all that good stuff. So if you want that, go to Ghost Dr. Chris. That's where they are available for sale. Oh, I want to get my Irate Gamer sets. All right, so for all you retro video game fans out there, there is a new arcade machine out called the Evercade. That's a bar top arcade machine. This one, what makes it unique is it has different cartridges that you can stick in the bottom, so you don't have to play the same ones like Pac-Man or Burger Time. If you get bored with it, like with the like you buy the arcade 1-up machines, you're stuck with those games. But with the Evercade, you can take the cartridge out, put a different one in, and play a whole new set of games. And it's got a marquee that lights up. It's amazing. I was playing around with this. I'm like, oh, this is so neat with all the bells and whistles.
Can you eat dinner on it?
Yes, you can, but I wouldn't suggest
I feel like
that.
I'm in an old school pizzeria.
One of the cool things about this machine is that they have different artwork machines that you can pick up, and they sent me the one that has Mega Man all over it, because I guess there are some Mega Man arcade games, which are kind of like brawlers. It's kind of like Street Fighter, but with Mega Man characters. And then, of course, when you get bored with that, take it out, put it in Burger Time, and boy, I love me some Burger Time.
Burger Time. Do they actually have Burger Time?
I know.
Only they have Burger Time.
There's not going to be a Geek Time episode that goes by that I don't mention Burger Time. Let's do this.
I love Burger Time, man.
So, all right, check out Evercade. They're in places like Best Buys, Amazons. So get yours today.
You're listening to the Geek Time Super Bowl special.
Unbelievable! Vikings win it!
With hosts Chris Boris
With a touchdown!
and Tim Warner.
Pass is intercepted at the goal line by Malcolm Butler.
As well as a few geeky Super Bowl related guests.
Stokely! Wow! Touchdown!
All right, we're back with Geek Time Super Bowl special, season 1, episode 6. And as we promised, we have some geeky Super Bowl guests. Now, our first one, his name is Alan Rubens, and he's spending a couple minutes with us on Geek Time here. He was the ad man on the Spudz McKenzie account. He was part of the whole Budweiser account, and those were some pretty popular commercials back then. He was like a, I don't remember what kind of dog, but he was like the kind of dog that you saw in the Little Rascals.
Yeah.
And he was really big. He was in posters, T-shirts, things like that, mugs. Gosh, he was everywhere, just kind of like Elvira.
When they were trying to get advertised to kids for beer.
Yes. So Spudz McKenzie, he was everywhere, and let's talk to the ad man himself right now.
Geek Time now brings you the man behind all those memorable commercials featuring the Budweiser dog mascot, Spudz McKenzie. They were super popular in the 1980s, and we are bringing back the nostalgia here today with Alan Rubens.
Hey, Alan, welcome to Geek Time.
Wow, I love that intro. That was great.
Oh, good. Well, we aim to please here. So I know we only have you for a few moments, so I want to get into your time with the Spudz McKenzie commercials.
Certainly.
Now, I was just a hair too young to remember too much about them, but I do recall it's one of those advertising campaigns that you look back and say, oh, I remember that. And in those commercials, you portrayed a dog that was too cool for school. He got all the girls, hung out on the beach, and he had those sunglasses, just a very iconic character. And this was a campaign that, even as a kid, it just really stood out for me.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that.
So now, how did you guys come up with the idea of Spudz McKenzie, and how did all this come into fruition?
Well, what happened was, when Light Beer came out, Miller Lite was doing great in Texas. I remember that. And we weren't, and Bud Light wasn't really taking off at all. And someone came up with a poster of Spudz McKenzie Party Animal. And it was just the dog the way it looked. And I got an assignment on a Friday, make this into a commercial and come back Monday. And I remember I had 3 different ways of doing Spuds.
And I know in the advertising world, they always say come prepared with 3 ideas so the client can pick and choose from them.
Yes, correct. I had 3 ideas. One was have Spuds talk, and one was a cartoon version, and one was just, have him wherever he goes, it's a party because he is, and he brings Bud Light. And that's the one they ultimately bought.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. Yeah, so he could have been a cartoon, or, well, that was one of the choices. Wow, that would have been crazy.
It was one of the ideas presented. You just didn't know what they would go for. Once they picked the direction, we were able to get started. And so, I had a couple of wonderful art directors. I remember those guys. And it was a lot of fun. And in the beginning, it was, since it was like for, younger kids, college-age kids, it was the irreverent icon, the way they looked at it. And so they really didn't bother with it that much. I remember the first shoot was for 3 spots.
Okay.
And, that was that. They liked it. It was fine. Put them on the air. And then we started showing them in Texas, and the sales went up. Then they started showing them in California, and the sales went up. And then they took it national.
Oh, so you guys did a test market run first then?
Correct. We wanted to try out a smaller market before going national. We could make sure the ads had an impact, and the sales went up, and then they took it national, and that's when the client got involved in making changes here and making changes there, because it really became pretty much the face of the beer for 3 years.
Oh, and rightly so, because you guys made a huge impact. Because I look back and I remember all the shirts and posters, and you had tons of magazine ads. You would walk into a bar and you'd see the Spudz McKenzie mascot. He was plastered everywhere. Like, if you grew up in that time frame, he was everywhere. He dominated.
Yeah, we did so much with Spuds, and that was so much fun. I remember I was shooting. I was in LA shooting, and then I got a call. You've got to fly to New York. I went, why? They said because Macy's is opening up a Spudz McKenzie area in their store, and you have to go and look at it. They want you to approve it, et cetera, et cetera. So I got there. I was on a Saturday morning, a line around the block, and I remember walking in, and they didn't want to let me in. And I said, I wrote this. I have to look at it. And they said, how do we know it's you? So I had to sing the Spudz McKenzie song the super party animal, that kind of stupid stuff. And they let me in, and on the way out, people were asking me for my autographs.
Dang, that's got to make you feel good.
It was very, very surreal. When you have an iconic situation like that, you can't let it go. And if you do let it go, you got to bring it back, at least give it a try.
So how long did this commercial campaign last?
Oh, I think I did the spots from 80, 85, 86, 87. And then they went in a different direction. But it's interesting because the original dog had died.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think it was 1988. And the dog's name was Evie. Once she died, they stopped doing more commercials.
So did they ever consider to get a different dog to replace Evie?
No, there was only one dog that was used, and there wasn't another Spuds out there. And like I said, once she died, that was it.
Well, I remember that Spudz McKenzie did a quick cameo shot in the Bud Bowl 1 that aired, I think it was 1989. Do you recall what happened there?
That was probably her last appearance. Or I think we used a shot from a previous commercial that was just slotted it in there.
So how was working with a dog actor on the set of these commercials?
It was actually great. People thought that we used stunt dogs and, little statue dogs. Nothing. It was all her. Could it have been trained? I mean, this dog was like, and I say this in a very positive way, like a lump of coal, where you'd sit her in a chair, you'd move her face wherever you wanted it, and she would just stay there. She was really cool.
Now, you said this campaign only lasted like 3 years. Was there ever a time where you guys considered bringing this mascot back?
Actually, yeah, there was. It might have been 90 or 91 or 89. It was definitely a few years after that I wanted to do it. And I pitched a new commercial. I had a commercial where someone was watching, seeing a spaceship land. And coming out of it was Elvis and Spuds. And someone is looking at them saying, who's that guy with Spud? Yeah, who's that guy with Spudz McKenzie? And the whole spot was like that. And Spuds would be passing by all these famous people, and they'd be like, hey, look at that guy, huh? Like, is that Tom Selleck with Spuds? Who's that guy cool enough to be with Spudz McKenzie? All that kind of stuff. I pitched it, but it went nowhere. I couldn't even get it out of the agency. They didn't go for it.
Wow, that's a great idea and very interesting to know.
Yep, he could have returned, but it just didn't happen.
Well, Alan, I know you have to go, but I want to thank you so much for your time because I just really wanted to revisit Spudz McKenzie for the special that we're doing.
Oh, it was my pleasure.
All right, thanks again, Alan. And that wraps up this segment on Spudz McKenzie. When we return, Geek Time will be talking to another advertising icon that gets into the Bud Bowl, so you don't want to miss it.
Technical difficulties. Please stand by. Geek Time continues transmitting next with
The Bud Bowl's Grand Pace.
All right, Geek Time fans, if you're a huge fan of Geek Time, we now have Geek Time shirts available. On the link below, you can get your own Geek Time shirts, and they look incredible. Now, there's two designs I couldn't pick between, so I'm like, oh, heck, I'll just make them both available for sale. So,
is it my face in neon?
Yes.
Woohoo!
So we've got shirts. Tim, I got you a shirt as well, so I know you're going to be wearing that all over town.
Heck yeah. I'll wear it next episode. You won't see me, but I'll be wearing it next episode.
You and me both. So yeah, get your Geek Time shirts now. Available at Teespring in the Irate Gamer store.
You're listening to the Geek Time Super Bowl special.
Unbelievable! Vikings win it!
With hosts Chris Boris.
With a touchdown!
And Tim Warner.
Pass is intercepted at the goal line by Malcolm Butler.
All right, welcome back to the Geek Time Super Bowl special. And now I'm so excited to talk to this next guest because he had a hand in the Bud Bowls.
And now, Geek Time is honored to talk to the man that helped bring us the pinnacle of Super Bowl commercials from the 1980s. He breathed life into one of the greatest Budweiser commercial campaigns ever created, the Bud Bowl. He is Grant Pace.
All right, Grant Pace, thank you. It's an honor to have you on Geek Time.
Wow, what an intro. I feel like I should be running out onto a field somewhere.
Yes, we tend to go above and beyond here for Geek Time. But yes, like I said, it's a pleasure to have you here. I grew up with the Bud Bowls. I remember being a little kid, and the 1 year they just popped up during a commercial. I'm like, what is this? And I was hooked ever since. And for a while there, it was a yearly tradition that I was like, oh, the Bud Bowl, I can't wait to see what happens this year. So you had a hand in those commercials, and I'm curious, where did the idea come from? How did it spawn? Let's get talking about this.
It really started right after the 1988 Super Bowl, which was a blowout. I can't remember the exact score, but it was one of those ghastly games that was over by the second quarter. And our client, August Busch. So I lived in St. Louis. I worked on the Budweiser account. I was a young copywriter, but our client, August Busch, pulled together the team after that and said, I spent all this money on these commercials, that ran during this game. The game was boring. The commercials, I think were just lost in the mix. This is stupid. Tell me something else we can do next year where if the game is bad, people will at least be talking about our commercials afterwards. So it honestly came from the client. The original request of his actual words were, I want to own the Super Bowl next year. Right. I'm not going to say that I was the one that raised my hand with the idea because I worked for, as part of a group. I was a team. I was just a young copywriter, but my bosses, two guys named Dave Hinkey and Bill Oakley, had just recently done a campaign featuring long neck bottles of beer. They were being sold to go instead of beer, bottles you could just get in a bar. And they had the idea of, gosh, what if we took those little animated bottles and made a football game out of it? And maybe it's Bud versus Bud Light. And that was kind of the genesis of the idea. And we went away and kind of concepted what it would look like and what it might feel like and what it would sound like. And what do we call, maybe one coach is Beer Bryant and he wears a houndstooth jacket and hat, and we went back to them, and to August Bush's credit, he said, I love it. I'm in. It was unheard of because no one had ever produced multiple, like a serial story, commercials before to be viewed during one event. I mean, this was going to be one time. I think we produced 5 commercials. They would only be seen one time. So that's a ton of money in production, ton of money to buy that many spots in the Super Bowl. But he said the idea was this will be an event and people will talk about it. And at the time we had no idea there'd be a Bud Bowl 2, 3, 4, 10. We called it Bud Bowl 1, but I don't think any of us thought, oh yeah, they'll pony up for this again the next year. And I don't know if you know this, but the original ending that we filmed that never ran would have precluded the playing of a second Bud Bowl. But go ahead.
Hold off on that because I want to get to like the production and what went into that.
Absolutely.
The set design, because this was a big gamble. I mean, like you said, you couldn't air it outside of the Super Bowl. I don't think anything has been done before like that. So you guys are pretty much all in.
It was all in. It was do or die. People are either going to embrace this thing, and it was tied into promotions, and we had those big in-dial displays and stuff, and you could take the thing and try and predict what the score was going to be, and so it was geared to sell a lot of beer as well, but it was also really meant to generate buzz.
When did the stop motion aspect come into play? Did you guys have any other ideas like, should we do animated or was it always stop motion?
Well, no, because we had previously done this small campaign featuring animated long necks. We'd already worked with the process and the client liked that. So we said, let's take that and blow it out. And then we went out and we found the best animators in the business, who happened to be a group of guys in New York called Broadcast Arts. They were famous at the time for doing Pee-wee's Playhouse.
Oh, okay.
Yep, which was, one of the hottest shows on television. And they'd done other animation, but they, certainly had never done anything on this scale.
Yeah, I remember the intro to that show was just all kinds of things flying around. So that's the best person to get for that.
And it certainly wasn't the most efficient use of our time, but because it's, doing stop motion animation is long and grueling and kind of insane, 8 hours of animation to get 2.5, 3 seconds of footage.
Oh, wow.
That we would come in and review and either say, yeah, that works, or, you know what? I don't really like the way the ball bounces off of this bottle here, so go back and do it again.
Oh, did that happen a lot? Where you had to redo stuff?
They were so good that there wasn't a lot of curveballs. There were some times where something just didn't quite play, or it didn't feel football-y enough or something. So I would say it was fairly rare that we had to send them back to the drawing board. But even that, I mean, it was just, I don't know, I can't remember which quarter it is, but like we have a scene where the cans are all doing the wave, that is moving every single one of those cans a little 1/8 of an inch hundreds of times, and then having it all work in one sequence.
Oh, very genius.
Yeah. But yeah, that was an amazing, talented group that we got to work with. I basically packed my bags from St. Louis and lived in New York City for 3 months, just doing the animation piece of that.
So how big were the sets?
The sets were, it was like a miniature football stadium that they built that had removable pieces so they could pull in and out and stuff like that. So, it wasn't much bigger probably than the room that you're in right now. Okay. So it's very detail driven work. The lighting is super important. So you don't want it to be too massive of a space. It's got to be controlled. And then it's just these dudes that like work all night long that come in and do, literally, like they did King Kong, the original King Kong, where you're just coming in and you're moving every little thing about an 1/8 of an inch and then hoping it all makes sense.
Well, it was interesting because I remember, I think it was after the first one or the second one, I remember reading through a magazine, one of those weekly magazines, and I can't remember if it was like Sports Illustrated or Newsweek, but there was an article in there, which I tried to find it online. I couldn't find it. It's buried in history somewhere. I remember seeing production photos where somebody probably submitted like a behind the look scenes to this magazine to say, this is what went into it. I remember seeing the guys like moving all the little cans and whatnot. And man, it must have took like the entire year to put that together.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think the animation alone, I think it took us somewhere between 3 and 6 months from the time we started to the time we finished. But then there was all the, the additional stuff. Like we created the original score, the same way you play that little piece of NFL music that when you introed me, like we used like the orchestra that created those kind of things for the networks and NBC and stuff to record, it's a 50-piece orchestra. That's just one little piece of the whole production. We had to record the voiceovers. We had Bob Costas and Paul McGuire reading those scripts for us, calling the plays. Now,
how did you approach Bob Costas? Because that was a big get back then.
Yeah, I think it came through the Bush family. Costas was from St. Louis, and Bud was in St. Louis, so I think that they knew each other to some degree there, and I think the original ask came through that, and also at the time Costas and McGuire were announcers on NBC, so NBC was involved in all of this as well. They had to approve it all.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so it wasn't that difficult. I mean, it took them saying, okay, I'll be an announcer on this, fake football game featuring bottles of beer. But once they were on board, they were amazing. Those two, that was one of the highlights of my career, was getting to go in a booth with those guys for a couple of days. And they had so much fun with it. And they totally played along with every joke and treated it like a huge game.
Oh, that is so cool. I also read that you had a hand in basically all the jokes that went into all the different sequences too, correct?
Well, I wouldn't say all of them. I mean, there was 4 of us that worked on it. Me and my partner really got to take a lot of it, the script, and run with it and stuff. But, it was like a writer's room where we just sat and you're just riffing on beer, football puns, and Bud. You had stuff that was inherent to the Bud brand. And so it was really just these where can we go with this thing? And surprisingly, there's actually quite a few beer, football, Bud puns out there. So thank God for it.
Now, with something this big, were you trying to struggle to come in on budget, or how did that all play out?
Honestly, budget never was an issue.
Interesting.
I think, it was August's idea. So he said, just bring me the biggest thing. I want to own the Super Bowl, and it wasn't cheap back then. So we even had a reshoot. I mean, we had this whole other ending, and he said, no, you got to do this other one. So, like movies have reshoots and stuff. We had a reshoot.
Yeah. What was the original ending to that?
So the original ending was, came right up to the last moment where the score was tied. The little Budsky was going to run out on the field to kick a field goal, which is where the original, where the one that aired had him actually kick the field goal and it ended. But we got up to that point, and then you heard this ominous music start to play, and you hear Costas McGuire going, wait, what is that? Oh my goodness. And this hand reaches down and pulls out 2 of the players, right? And you match cut to the inside of a kitchen, and there's a party going on, like a Super Bowl party. And this guy's got 2 beers in his hands, and he stops for a second and looks around like, did he just see something inside the fridge? And then he shakes his head and walks away. And then there's like a slow zoom on the refrigerator, and a light starts coming out from it. And you hear Costas and McGuire going, call the commissioner, call the police, call somebody. What just happened? So it was like did it really happen or not? It was this whole joke on, was that really a game, or was it all in our imagination? It was very funny.
I was reading online too. There's an article I think that you had a hand in with the Sports Illustrated that said you were trying to emulate the Saint Elsewhere ending, which was really big back then, where I think they panned down and there's a snow globe. And was kind of like what is this?
It was the series finale for St. Elsewhere, and it was, you got to the whole end of years of drama and characters and all that, and then it was in the snow globe in the hands of an autistic child looking at that, and it was like, did it really happen or did it not?
I ended up watching online on YouTube. There's a few Bud Bowl clips on there, and they had that alternate ending that you're talking about. So I don't know how that got released, but it was they probably got like the original tape and put it online. So it's out there if you want to see it.
Yeah, no, I've got it. It probably was, it might have gotten picked up from something I posted or something. It wasn't like, there was legalities involved with sharing that or something. It was, this is insane, but I got invited to throw out the first pitch at a baseball game, a minor league baseball game in Massachusetts for the Lowell Spinners, because they were having Bud Bowl night. And they featured that original, the ending you never saw. And I got to kind of throw out a first pitch. And they must have been very, very desperate for entertainment. But that was, so it's been out there for a while.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So this thing got that big that they did a Bud Bowl night.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
it's got a cult following. I mean, including yourself, right?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, and this kind of leads into my next question. Like, what was the overall reception after that aired?
It was great. And people got it. They, the critics tried to say, oh, it was corny and it was cheesy. It was like, that was the whole point. It was just pun after pun after pun. And it was over the top and it was ridiculous. And for the most part, it was embraced. I think Ad Age called it the greatest promotion of the century or of the decade or whatever the hell it was. But it worked as a promotion. So like as an advertising tool, it succeeded beyond our wildest dreams. And then, people were asking to see it again, to see another one. So by the time 2 rolled around, people were excited about it and they kind of got it and were ready to have some fun with it.
And I remember, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like the Bud Bowl really set the stage for all these other companies and corporations being like, hey, wait a minute, we got to start doing something big and bold with our commercials too. And I look back at Super Bowl commercials, and I think that was like one of the biggest turning points for the commercial side of things for the Super Bowl. Yeah,
it definitely added to the event nature of advertising the Super Bowl. I mean, the biggest one that ever came before that was Apple, what they did in 1984 with the Ridley Scott, which is to this day one of the greatest commercials ever made. But even they had trouble replicating that. I think the idea of tying it into promotional things, and I mean that certainly people learned some lessons from that, and I think it set the stage for that for sure.
Now I remember there was these the scoring sheets were involved, where if you had like the exact score that the Bud Bowl had, you were a winner. How did that all evolve, and when did that come into play, being intertwined?
That's a good question. I don't remember exactly how the scoring worked, or if you got a card and if your score matched up with the actual score. I don't remember the mechanism that. I know that it was a very low barrier to entry, that it was sometimes those promotions are really just meant to drive like end-aisle displays and get people to, if it was pick up a 6-pack and you get a scorecard with it, whatever, it wouldn't have been, I don't think that there was necessarily a prize associated with it. I think it was more of a gimmick to play along. But what is funny is USA Today literally had a betting line on the game before it was played.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, Danny Sheridan, who did all their handicapping and stuff, he had a column, and I talked to him recently, in fact, and he still laughs about that. He took the idea to his editors, and they were like, "You can't run a line for a make-believe game." And he's like, "Oh, come on, it'll be fun. We'll just." And they're like, "What if people bet it?" And then they get pissed off, And he's like, and he said it was one of the funnest things he'd ever been a part of. He actually loved doing that. So a lot of ways we got people involved.
Oh, I see. It's just a sign of like, this thing is going to be big. And it was too.
I don't know if you know this either, but Letterman lampooned it on his show.
Oh, did he?
He did. He had Bob Costas on as a guest. And he basically quizzed him and said, so tell me about this thing called the Bud Bowl. I understand it's bottles of beer, playing football. We're very near the end of civilization, people. You know, he totally, and then they, you know, in typical Letterman fashion, they had set up a table with bottles of beer on it. And then somebody came in and just smashed them all together. And there was glass flying and beer flying and stuff. It's like, that was a highlight for me, because anytime you get lampooned by David Letterman, you know, you know, you've arrived.
Oh, that's hilarious. I don't think I've ever seen that. I don't even know if it's on the internet. So
if I can find it, I'll send it to you. I know I've got a clip of it somewhere.
Oh, perfect. Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah.
I'd love to see that. So how were the little helmets made? Because I always thought they should sell those, because I've always wanted the little Budweiser helmets.
I don't know. You're probably too young to have ever known this, but when I was young, there were little helmets that were like pencil sharpeners, and you could collect them and stuff like that. So that those existed as little collectibles. Now we didn't use those. We you know, they made all their own. We made all their own props and everything. That's one of the things that production company was great at, was making really lifelike little props.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I remember the little helmets that came in the little coin machines where you get the little
exactly.
I don't know if that's the same thing, but I do remember those.
If you could have seen the table of props, you know, it was mind blowing, because it was the clipboards that the coaches held. There's one scene where a coach throws it down, and you can see the paper, you know, that we animated to make it look like it was flying in the air and stuff, and the water bottles and those cushions or guards that some of the defensive players used to have around their necks and stuff. Like, no detail was spared. Like it was so lifelike and so ridiculous.
Wow. So how long did pre-production on something like this take?
Oh, it took months.
Oh, wow. So that's probably where a lot of the time went, and then animating all that.
Yeah. I mean, you got it literally teed up, no pun intended, but then, you know, everything was approved, and this is the way the bottles want to look and everything. And then it was, let's start bringing it to life.
Gotcha. Now with the second Bud Bowl, what were the thoughts going into that? Because you can notice, or if you watch them back to back, you'll notice the film stock is better. You have more sets, and the whole overall presentation feels more polished.
Well, and it probably was. You may not know this, but I did not work. I only worked on the first one. I parlayed my success at this into a job in New York City, and I went to work on Miller.
Oh, okay. The
Miller beer. Yeah. Now, I grew up in Kansas City, and I was told at a young age in advertising that if I wanted to make it, I needed to get to New York. And, you know, my path took me through St. Louis, where I got to work on this, but then I ended up going with a few other people from that worked on this as well, and going to live in New York after that. So I watched from 2 on, I watched from afar, and I loved it. So, but I wasn't a part of the production.
Oh, I bet. So from working at the competitors and getting their standpoint, how did they view the Bud Bowl?
Well, I mean, I can tell you that Miller hated it.
Rightly so.
It was one of the first things we were asked was, what can we do to beat that? But at the time, there was only one beer sponsor. You know, there were different sponsors.
I was going to say, I think they were sponsored in.
Yep.
With
so Miller couldn't touch the Super Bowl. They couldn't even run ads in the Super Bowl. So we had to come up with some different tactics. But their competitors did not enjoy the success of that campaign. I can promise you that. But the guys in St. Louis loved every minute of it.
So after this thing aired, you said that stadiums were having Bud Nights and things like that. What other things that you can remember came out with a response to this?
When I was asked to do that first pitch, that was years later. That was more of like a nostalgia thing than anything else. It was kind of a standalone. I don't remember we were never asked to create other type of events or anything like that. I think people were afraid to take that, to try and emulate that. One, because of the cost, but two, because I just don't know that it would have played in other environments. I don't think you could have done it for other sports. Super Bowl is so unique in that it's one night, it's one game.
Right.
You couldn't do it for the World Series or the NBA, something like that. I don't see how you could have ever pulled that off. Now, nowadays, you probably could, because the way we tell stories and the way campaigns are created is so different. But back then it was you had a tent pole and you worked around that. And I don't know that I know of any other type Bud Bowl experiences that happened beyond that. I know people got real tired of it after about 10 years.
Well, they only did, I think it was like 6 of them, because there's a few years there where they went off and did these weird things where they had a guy running around the landscape and they followed him, which had no relation to what the Bud Bowl was doing. But I always thought, I was like, oh man, I would love to see it return one day. And even after all this time, every year I'm like, maybe they could do it this year, but they never do. So, but I will say it's one of the coolest campaigns that I fondly remember growing up with. So,
well, thank you. That means a lot hearing that. And yeah, it was really, really, I'm very, very grateful I got to be a part of that. I still look back and chuckle at some of the things that we snuck in there. The fact that we had the guy with the rainbow wig holding up a Bud 316 sign. Yes. You couldn't do that today. There's no way you could do that today,
it's funny because that even predates what goes on in wrestling now, where they have Steve Austin, where he made a reference like Austin 316. And that was like years before that even happened. Yeah. So you were kind of ahead of the curve on that one too. So, all right, Grant, thank you so much for your time. I loved going down memory lane with you on this one, and it was a pleasure.
No, thank you, Chris. I'm glad I could be a part of your afternoon.
All right, well, you're listening to Geek Time, the Super Bowl special.
Adjusting audio playback.
Geek Time. We'll be right back.
All right, so if you're a fan of cell animation art, there's a new company called Naftos, Naftos, that's making these really cool limited prints they're called Pop Art Animation Cell. They sent me one of Batman, the animated series, and I gotta say it's great because you just don't get the animation cell of the one I have is of Batman from the animated series, but they actually take a background and frame it and mount it, and it looks amazing. So I don't know if you've ever been to like a Comic-Con, but I know there's sellers there that have booths totally dedicated to animation cells, and I just love flipping through it. I'll find like Ren and Stimpy, and I'm like, oh, that's so cool, or Huckleberry Hound or something. I'm like, oh, I remember these guys. But
have you ever been to like San Diego Comic-Con or any of the major Comic-Cons?
No, nothing that big.
Yeah, but they used to have artists come to the Magic conventions and stuff, and they'd always have their works and their proofs and everything. From some of the art from the Magic cards was always sweet, and you could buy that and stuff too. So they had some of the cells and stuff they did. It's always cool. Art to me is it's really interesting, the market for art. People pay big dollars for some art. And stuff.
Oh my gosh, yes. And these are limited edition. They've come with a certificate of authenticity, of course. Yeah, look them up. They've got all kinds of interesting prints that range from the entire Warner Brothers library. I saw Jetsons, Flintstones, and Scooby-Doo, and a host of others. Okay. If you want to get your own animation cell, visit naftos.com.
You're listening to the Geek Time Super Bowl special.
Unbelievable! Vikings win it!
With hosts Chris Boris.
With a touchdown!
And Tim Warner.
Pass is intercepted at the goal line by Malcolm Butler.
All right, so we're nearing the end of the show with our last segment, and now it is going to be Tim's time.
I don't think so, Tim.
Timmer!
Yeah, this is my Tim time, and we're going to talk about some tech stuff that I feel like we could add to the NFL football.
Major wow factor.
If anybody watched the AFC Championship game this year, it was the Kansas City Chiefs and the Buffalo Bills. And there was a crucial fourth down where the Bills needed 1 yard, and then they went for it, and they didn't get it. The referees said they went ahead and did the challenge. The challenge rule, they used the video clips. They didn't see it to go over, but a lot of people were... shall not pass! Here's my thought about it, guys. Why in the world aren't we actually making the football have some kind of Wi-Fi to it? Why are we using human eyes, even video, to happen when it comes to it? What drives me nuts is that they get a pylon happening. You can't see where the ball's at. How can a referee tell where the ball's at? But if they were to have some kind of infrared technology on maybe both ends of the football, or something on there too, where you could actually see. Now, this could be something that, just like with the challenge, only gets used when the other team challenges or the officials make a challenge during the 2-minute warning.
You've been Bardoed.
Who knows who's touching you? Who knows what's going on? Maybe,
you should have gave that idea to Vince McMahon when he was doing his XFL. That way,
that's funny enough that you say that, because I was mentioning this to some people, and they said, well, maybe they should try this out in like the arena football leagues or the CFL. And you know what's funny about that? You joke about that, but the XFL actually used a lot of different technologies that the NFL currently uses now.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's why I said it.
One of the things that the XFL did was it had that the camera that went over the across the field, so it gave you like that Madden view. Up until the XFL, we really weren't getting the Madden view where you see it from the behind the quarterback.
There's a documentary out there on the XFL, which, since we're talking about football, I encourage everyone to go out and try to find this. I know it's a couple years old. It's a little outdated now, so it might be on YouTube somewhere, but it's like the XFL documentary. Fantastic. And they talk about a lot about what you're saying, Tim.
Yes, I lived it. Actually, as a big fan of wrestling, I watched the XFL trying to think that, this was going to be great. And it really wasn't great. They had a lot.
You think?
I want to see that documentary now. I might check that out next time.
Yeah, it was good. It was on like ESPN, I think. They first aired it, and I caught like half of it. And I don't know where. I think I illegally downloaded it afterwards.
The dark web.
I wanted to see the whole thing because they didn't really have TiVos and whatever back then. So
yeah, and I'm pretty sure they go into the problem with Saturday Night Live. That was one of the real big reasons that they got into trouble, was they had a game that went into like quadruple 5x overtime, to where it actually pushed Saturday Night Live back. And Lorne Michael was mad about it because his people who were doing Saturday Night Live,
resistance is futile,
to end because they had contracts with Vince McMahon and the XFL that they couldn't leave the game until the game was over.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
0.0.
So one of the last things I want to talk about is all the streaming that goes on with football. So I heard a bunch of people ranting on this, and I'm like, wow, great point, where they're saying that, and look, I'm not a really hardcore football guy. If it's on, I'll turn it on if it's a team that I like. But for all these hardcore fans out there, if you want to watch football, you have to subscribe to 3 different streaming services just as a football fan. Now, that is crazy in this day and age.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, man. And I'll tell you, like, there's 3 different ones. Like, Amazon has the Thursday night games, and then during the playoffs, I know Netflix had some games, or maybe I'm thinking about it was a Christmas Day had Netflix games.
Plus, they had streaming problems, didn't they? Like,
of course
it was
they
cutting
do,
out.
Because when, like, some of those, like Netflix, I really don't feel like Netflix is built to really do a lot of live events.
Please, no!
Look, I know all this streaming came about because they're like, oh, we want to cut the cord to cable and things like that. But now you have all these streaming services. We're back where we started. We have
the end result of all these streaming services doing all this thing and all this IP crap, and this is my toys and your toys, it is all a circle to go back to cable. Now I have to get a package to buy Disney Plus, Hulu, and freaking Amazon and all these other streaming services. It's the same thing, people. Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, and you really see a contracting of the streaming world. And I think it's because of this. Because when I first heard about this, I thought, okay, great, because we're going to get some great programming. But the problem that now exists is that usually these streaming platforms has 1 or 2 good, really programs, and then the rest is garbage. I can't tell you how many times I go through Netflix, I'm like, I'll start watching something, and I'm 10 minutes in, I'm like, this is horrible. I turn it off. It's just more junk that you have to sift through for the good stuff. So I'm just,
and you know what?
I'm done. I want it all to burn to the ground. I'm like, let's start over. All right, Tim. Well, we're at the 4th and 1, and the clock has got us. So we're going to have to wrap up Geek Time this week. I hope you enjoyed our Super Bowl special. And a special
this is
thanks.
Howard Cosell, and we had a great day here at Geek Time.
Or you could do the John Madden thing where he circles everything and
boom,
go play by play. But all right, special thanks to our guests, Alan Rubin, Grant Pace, for being on the show, and thank you for your time, and we'll see you next time on Geek Time.
Live long and prosper.
Geek Time.